Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the show on Tuesday, June 17th. This is Fantasy Football Today, and we are talking about bust-proof players, a concept that I don't even really believe in because, guys, I've been looking at the last couple of years of ADP, and I would say half of the first round over the last 2 years, if not more than 50%, has been a bust. Be it injury or otherwise, there have been a lot of busts. Last year, Christian McCaffrey was an injury bust. Would you say CeeDee Lamb was a bust last year? He was a bust, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Lamb finished as wide receiver. Yeah, he was a bust. He was wide receiver 9 per game, and he was the second pick in the draft. Like, that's 100% a bust. For Heath to believe it's a bust, it's got to be like the worst season ever.
I think there's a difference between being a bad pick at ADP and being a bust. I'm probably not going to call anybody who's top 10 at their position a bust.
The two biggest busts last year were Tyreek Hill and Breece Hall.
Tyreek Hill and Breece Hall, they were next on the list. They were 3 and 4 in ADP, or they were up there. They were top 5. A.J. Brown, was he a bust? I would say he was. He was wide receiver 13 per game. He was a first-round pick. Now, maybe you are more on Heath's camp, and I don't know if that's a bust. Maybe it's a mild bust. Jonathan Taylor, injuries. Garrett Wilson was definitely a bust.
Yeah, busts come in different shapes and sizes. Mm-hmm. And so we can all have our preferences for how we define that.
Okay, and 2023, Justin Jefferson was the first pick in the draft. He averaged 20 points per game when he was healthy, which is good. Not great, but good. But he actually probably left one of those games early. I didn't do an Azer stat there, but he missed a bunch of games. Jamar Chase had a bad season. He was a bust. Austin Eckler was a huge bust. Saquon Barkley, see that Heath and I disagreed on that one. Saquon Barkley was RB3 in ADP. He was RB9 per game. I consider that a bust. Heath did not, which is fine. But we agreed Bijan Robinson was a bust. Stephon Diggs had a bad year in 2023. Nick Chubb tore his ACL, and Devontae Adams was mild bust, I guess. But bottom line is that the first round hasn't been as safe as we want it to be.
Are we defining these by performance or injury or both?
Most of them, all the guys I said, I think only 3 of them were, maybe 4 were injury. McCaffrey last year, Jonathan Taylor last year, and Jefferson and Chubb the year before.
I think that there's another distinction, though, because does an injury bust have to just be a guy that misses half the season and then he was an injury bust, or your favorite player and human being, Tyreek Hill, if he, as you've said numerous times, had a broken wrist all year, was hurt all year, was he an injury bust?
He was the worst type of bust because he played hurt, stayed on the field. You felt obligated to start him each week because you know what his upside is, but he almost never gave you that upside. I can't. That's the worst for me, is when a player stinks and yet I still am compelled to start him because of his ADP, where I drafted him. This might be the week that Tyreek Hill breaks out, and so on and so forth. It sucks when a guy gets hurt. Like McCaffrey got hurt. You took him with your first pick. That totally sucked. At least you knew not to start him because he wasn't playing.
Who did I bench Tyreek Hill for in the fantasy championship? Does anyone remember? He was
Peyton Barber.
He finally had a good game. He finally had a good game in week 17, and I benched him for some waiver wire guy, and it did not. I would have lost anyway, but he had 9 catches for 105 yards on 9 targets at Cleveland. That was after a combined 65 yards the 2 previous weeks.
It took you 4 months to build up the courage to sit Tyreek Hill.
That's what I'm saying, but right.
That's part of the problem.
Tua was out at that point. Tua was out at that point. So
maybe that actually means that CeeDee Lamb wasn't a bust last year, because even though he didn't meet expectations, he still averaged over 17 PPR points per game, and he was fairly consistent.
No, he was a bust. Are you kidding? He was number 1 receiver off the board, and what did I say? He finished his wide receiver.
Gave you 17.6 PPR points per game. He was 6th among all wide receivers in consistency, top 3 in targets per game. I know he didn't give you what you wanted, but he didn't kill you like Tyreek Hill killed you, or like Breece Hall killed you.
No, Lamb was better than those guys, but he was the bust. Come on, Dave. Don't take Heath's side here.
I think Heath's right. I'm going to go back on that one.
Oh, that hurts. That hurts.
CeeDee Lamb, not a bust.
Are you kidding me, Jamie?
You heard it.
Some reason
There it
here. Was CeeDee Lamb a bust last year?
Yes.
You're both wrong.
All right, so we'll talk about players that we think are bust proof. But Dave and I had a little chat off the air via instant message. Would you be happy with 20 fantasy points per game from Jamar Chase? Last year, he averaged 23.7. He's I guess the bet right now to be 1.1 in the consensus ADP. Would you be happy with 20 fantasy points per game from Jamar Chase in full PPR? You would?
Yes.
You'd be happy if any non-quarterback you draft at any point in the draft that averages 20 points per game, you don't get to complain about that.
I just have higher standards than you guys. First overall pick.
Whoa. Aren't you the same guy that said you didn't want a runaway first round pick like Christian McCaffrey last year?
I don't want a guy who's averaging 28 points per game. I said that 2 years ago. And by the way, we've had 2 years in a row of nobody being that good. And we've had
it was last year coming off the 2023 season.
No, I think it was 2 years ago. And we've had 2 years in a row of more parity. And it's been, many people were saying, the 2 best fantasy football seasons ever. So I think I was right about that. All right, Jamar Chase in his career has averaged 18, 20.5, 16.4, and 23.7 PPR fantasy points per game in 4 seasons. Why don't we just start with him? Do we consider him bust proof? And by the way, if he averages 20, if a wide receiver averaged 20 PPR fantasy points per game over the last 5 seasons, that would have made him wide receiver 4, 4, 5, 5, and 3 per game. But do we think Jamar Chase is bust proof? Because I guess if I were going to argue against it, his 2024 season kind of reminds me of CeeDee Lamb's 2023 season, because Chase did something he's never done before. He had his best season by far. It was very much backloaded. He wasn't even really that good the first 8 games of the season. The last 9 games of the season, Joe Burrow was insane, on pace for something like 5,400 yards. Chase was, let's see, the last 8 games of the season, Chase was on pace for 2,106 yards, 21 touchdowns on 223 targets, just video game numbers. But again, this was the best stretch of his career, the best season of his career. It came with Joe Burrow being better than Burrow is on pace for 5,682 yards and 49 touchdowns in those 8 games. So do you see the parallels there? Chase this year, Lamb last year. And do you think he's bust proof?
No.
I think if any wide receiver's quarterback misses half the season, they get bust. Yep. So I think it's better to talk about bust potential without injury, because I don't think we're very good at predicting injury, especially when you're talking about wide receivers. And now you have to predict whether their quarterback is going to get hurt or they're going to get hurt. So I think CD was right around 19 fantasy points per game with Dak last year.
Right.
I think 19 is possible for Chase, sure. But I'm not going to sit around and worry about, is this guy going to score 19 fantasy points a game?
Okay. 19. So that was Lamb. He averaged 23.8 the year before, which is a little bit better than what Chase averaged in 2020.
Any wide receiver that averages 23 fantasy points a game, you should not expect them to do it again the next year. You should not expect any player to average 23 fantasy points per game unless they're a quarterback.
To that end, there were 4 human beings last year that averaged over 20 PPR points per game that were not quarterbacks. So getting one of those guys with your first pick, I would say, is a pretty good idea.
Okay.
Not for Adam.
No,
Right.
I mean,
That's not enough for new Adam.
You raised it to 21.
New Adam is going to take
this.
a quarterback in round 1 because
Let me ask you this.
quarterbacks can score 30 points per game.
Let me ask you this. Different. Frame it differently. If you take Jamar Chase as wide receiver 1 or as the first overall pick, you would be happy if he finished as wide receiver. What's the lowest finish he could have that you'd be happy with the pick?
At his position?
Yeah.
I think you're asking the question the wrong way.
If he was wide receiver 5, I'd be happy with it, assuming that the 4 guys ahead of him were all within the same range as him.
Right. I'm thinking
So
more
like
along.
if he's wide receiver 5 at 17 points per game, and the 4 guys ahead of him are all over 20 points per game, then I'd be disappointed.
CeeDee Lamb last year, 17.6 PPR points per game. If Jamar does that this year, it's kind of a bummer, but I wouldn't say that he's a bust.
Oh, yes, you would. Yes,
no,
you
we're having the same exact argument we had
I know.
6 minutes ago.
There's a difference. There's got to be some in between, Adam, between I am happy with this pick and this guy was a bust. A bust is bad, significantly like bad. There's a middle ground in between. I'm happy with him and he's a bust.
I just think
what if he finishes wide receiver 6, but the 5 receivers ahead of him averaged 18?
But both can be true.
That I don't know, 17.6.
Both.
I don't think it's a bust at that point. He's got to do what Garrett Wilson did last year. Okay, Garrett Wilson was taken in round 1. We all loved him because we thought he'd be the guy that we thought he'd be the guy that DK Metcalf is, who we think will be that guy this year, where he just soaks up targets from Aaron Rodgers nonstop. And he didn't do it. His numbers sank. He wasn't even on the same page as Rodgers at points during the early part of the year. And he didn't even average 15 PPR points per game. That's a bust.
See, but that's an interesting case, though, because
the Adams
the pace that he was on before Devontae Adams, especially the couple of games before Devontae Adams, like he probably would have lived up to his draft billing if Adams never went there. Or he wouldn't have been close.
Yeah, I mean, he was leading the NFL in targets.
Right. Like that's like this is the factor that we can't control, trades or anything, or to like Keith's point, the quarterback injuries. I think like a better one, Dave, is probably Marvin Harrison, who just stunk.
That is a better one.
And was a first round pick.
Garrett was at 16.2 in the 6 games, and they were like all into those week 5 and 6 games. He didn't even have 15 PPR points in a game until week 5.
Yeah, he was probably like a mild bust at that point, but it was worse after that trade.
Sure.
Okay. So what I think happened in the last few minutes was Dave started talking about if Jamar Chase averaged 17 point whatever points per game,
17.6,
and you realized that he would be a bust, but you wouldn't go back.
No, that's not a bust. It's not what I want.
Okay. All right. We're going to take a break here, and we got some news and notes for you. And then we'll talk about some players that we think might be bust proof right after this on FFT.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
News and notes. Jordan Addison's trial for his 2024 DUI arrest is set for June 15th.
July.
So, yeah, it was not 2 days ago. July 15th. Thank you. So we actually could have a suspension. We'll see what happens there with Jordan Addison. Jonnu Smith's situation with the Dolphins is still fluid, according to his agent, Drew Rosenhaus. And minor news, maybe, but deeper leagues, Josh Reynolds is the favorite to be the number 2 wide receiver for the Jets. All right. So
Garrett Wilson should be a first round pick.
Second on the team in targets for the Jets is going to be who?
Mason Taylor.
Josh Reynolds.
Breece Hall? No votes for Breece Hall?
No, I would take Lazard over Reynolds still.
Right.
I figured. I think Lazard's going to be with Aaron Rodgers probably.
Yeah, that might be true.
So bust-proof players.
Probably begging for Randall Cobb to come out of retirement right now.
Where is Jordy Nelson these days?
Dave said Burrow and Allen at quarterback. Heath said Burrow, Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Jalen Hurts. Neither of you said Jaden Daniels. Do we not think he's bust-proof?
You'll see a little more.
Okay.
I said Mahomes too, but that's only because of cost.
All right, but that's a good one, right? Because Mahomes is QB, what, 6 for you guys?
Yep.
QB 6, I think he's getting drafted in round 6.
I would argue that, and oh man, you better not disagree with this one, or I will fly to Florida and we'll have at it.
That would be. Are you incentivizing me?
It is Nat season down here, so.
I hope this flight will be expensed.
I thought you were a Panthers fan. You're not here already.
Would love to be there. See how much ticket. I'm going to look at how much tickets
So
are.
it's $1,000.
Are they?
Get it? Yeah.
Anyway, if Patrick Mahomes gets drafted in the 6th round as QB6 and he does what he did the last 2 years, where he's basically QB12 per game, bust.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I think that if you made a list at the end of each season of all the players who were busts by your definition, it would be a very, very long list.
You think
Mahomes was definitely a bust the last 2 years.
Yeah, come on.
Right, but he was drafted as the top 3 quarterback.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's a completely different thing than if he's drafted in round 6.
But if you draft him in round 6 and he ends up as QB 11 on the year, I see Adam's point.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah. That's not what we want. We want somebody.
It's not what I want. I wouldn't be happy.
Top 8.
He's
Again, though, you got to put it in context. Is he QB 11 because he had a good season and everybody else was better, or is he QB 11 because
That's
he's
fair. Right. Yes, I should have said that. Like if he finishes with 22 points per game, that's pretty good.
but he hasn't done that either of the last 2 years. He's been Mahomes has been right around 20
20.9,
21. Right, 21 points per game. So if you're drafting that in the 6th round, I'd be pretty disappointed with that. Personally, I didn't think he was bust proof even at his cost, because if he just does what he's done each of the last 2 years, I think that's a bad 6th round pick personally.
It's not one you're happy with, no.
Okay. Does anybody disagree about Allen, Jackson, Hurts, and Burrow being bust proof?
They're all busts potential.
I'll make the case for Jackson not being bust proof. We're taking him as the QB2. Some people want him as QB1. The years before last year, this is 2023 and back, 23.7 points per game, 22.5, 21.6, 21.6 in 2021, 24.7 in 2020. I think if you're drafting him as the second quarterback off the board on average, you're expecting him to be on the bright side of 25, if not closer to 30, which is where he was last year. You're looking for a repeat of last year if you're drafting Lamar Jackson as the top quarterback off the board, or even the second quarterback off the board. But he's been pretty low, not as low as Mahomes, but more like top 6-ish by comparison. And that would disappoint me a little. That would make me a little sad. I'd cry 3 tears.
Yeah. So the only issue I have with everything you just said was that he is a guy that I think you do have to Azer stat, because Lamar Jackson has, left games early, and it's really affected. I mean, you could be talking about a point and a half per game. So
right, but I'm still starting him in those games where
okay,
early.
I get it, but when he's healthy, this is what he's done over the previous 5 seasons. 32, the 6 point per passing touchdown leagues, 32.5 points per game. That was his first MVP. 25.5, 24.2, 24.3, 23.6. And last year, I think, was 30 points, right?
30.1.
So even removing the injured games, 4 years in a row, Lamar Jackson was between 23.6 and 25.5 fantasy points per game in 6 point per passing touchdown leagues. He was usually finishing closer to QB5. 1 year is QB10 per game, 1 year QB8, then 5, then 4, and then last year 1. Yep. Let's say he averages 24.5 points per game and he finishes as QB4 per game. You guys cool with that, as taking him as QB1 or 2?
If that's the floor, sure.
How much better were the other 3 guys?
I mean, I can't really do this for every player. I mean,
we're talking about a guy that's going number 1 or 2 at his position.
Right. That's the thing. Like in a normal year, that's if he's QB4 and he's going 1 or 2, I don't want to quibble, but that's what he had been for 4 straight years. He had been more like 24 points per game. And then he's got these bookend years where he's scoring 30 or more points per game.
It's a better floor than anybody other than Josh Allen.
I wouldn't say it's a bust.
Second best floor at the position. And right. I think what we've seen, I think Jamie, when he sent the text, we had a little text chat about busts this morning. And Jamie said anyone after round 10, because everybody you drafted early could bust. And that's kind of how you view it, Adam. Like anybody could be 3 points worse than they were last year. and they're a bust.
Well, I just think it's important for people who draft Lamar Jackson as QB1 to know that even if you remove his injured games, he was averaging about 24 points per game in the 4 years combined. And he hadn't finished higher than QB4 in that stretch. But we have seen the heights of Lamar Jackson. They're pretty much unmatched.
I think at this position, because to get one of the top, I'll say 5 guys, but really the top 3, I think are going to go a little bit sooner. If you don't get your return on investment to that level, and I think 4th is fine, but like if you don't get your return on investment to that level, like you really could be in trouble.
Can you say, I'm sorry, say that one more time?
If you're investing in a position that's so deep and has so much talent to it, that if you do bust at this position with the early pick at quarterback, and let's say it's Fields or Dak or, I'm just cherry picking on the other side of the, graphic here. Trevor Lawrence has a big year, whoever it may be.
Right.
Drake May.
Right.
Like you really bust at that position a little bit more, I think. Like it's you don't want to qualify at the level of bust, but like Jackson going from QB1 to QB4 with a significant point per game drop off, like could really sink your fantasy team by comparison to, let's say, these other positions. At least, I don't know if I'm explaining that the right way, but
No, I get it.
I get it. It's like this. You'd rather be the guy that takes Bo Nix with your last pick or off the waiver wire than spends the 6th round pick on CJ Stroud last year, or the 3rd or 4th round pick on Patrick Mahomes.
But it's not so much the 6th round pick on CJ Stroud. It's that these guys, their ADP is going to be most likely in round 2.
Right.
And
it already is in our fans only.
So like that to me is, it like magnifies the bust potential, because like you really need to hit on these guys being they're at their ADP. Right?
So that's kind of what I was getting at, right? If you take Jackson or Allen in round 2, do you feel like you need at least 26 points per game in 6 point per passing touchdown leagues to feel good about that pick? Or are you cool with 24?
I think, again, it's probably relative to the position, so where they're finishing in that range. So if they're at 24 and that's the best, it's a down year for quarterbacks, and I think you're fine with it. If there's, 4 or 5 guys that have, eclipsed them, 2 or 3 guys that have eclipsed them to whatever degree, then it probably, you feel like you wasted the pick. But it depends on how you, approach it. Like, obviously, he's not going to be upset about it, whereas you're going to be a little bit more disappointed.
Yeah. All right. Running back.
I got a guy who's an easy must start, who's at the top of the league as far as points per game. I'm not complaining.
Yeah. No, look, I mean, there's some players that you're not going to complain, but you're going to be, thought he'd be a little bit better than that.
Like CeeDee Lamb. Like, you're not going to complain about it, but you were hoping for more.
There you go. No complaining allowed.
I'm pretty sure Adam's going to complain.
That's not. Is
that old Adam or new
old
Adam?
Yeah, new Adam's still going to complain. All right, running backs.
Are we allowed to make pickups this week, or what? Did you change that again?
Tonight, you can make your pickups
right,
for the Bake Burger League. No problem. There were so many players dropped over the last few days, and they're all horrible, and I don't want any of them, including the 7 that I had to drop. Running backs that are bust proof. So Dave, you said Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor. Heath added, Bijan, Barkley, Gibbs, Kyron, and also Taylor and Jacobs. I guess my question is, do you think any running back like Derrick Henry and maybe Jonathan Taylor, depending on how many games Anthony Richardson plays, that is going to be so low in receiving volume and receptions, is bust proof? Apparently, Dave, you do.
No, I like the running backs that I think have a big grip on the workload, and their offense isn't necessarily changing compared to last year, and they're gonna get a ton of short yardage touchdowns. It might be different for me with Jonathan Taylor if Anthony Richardson is healthy and he's back at training camp and he's dazzling, because obviously that's a guy that's going to take away a lot of touchdowns at the goal line from Taylor. I don't think Jones will take away nearly as many. Might take like 2. And so Taylor last year.
Yeah, go ahead. He has a follow-up question. Go ahead.
Didn't Taylor score like the highest rate of his career playing with Richardson last year?
He might have. So maybe that point doesn't even matter.
He had 50% of the goal line carries when Richardson was on the field, which is a pretty low number.
Yeah, that's low. So that'll go up if it's Daniel Jones starting and then he keeps the job all year long.
But he scored more than a touchdown per game in those games, right?
It's quite possible. I mean, he was very good, especially at the end. But I don't. It depends. Like, do you just look at the raw production, or do you look at the underlying trends, which is very few one catch per game, and half the goal line work is not great. But he was really good with Richardson. They ran the offense through him. He had a ton of carries. So yeah, there's two sides of that coin. Dave.
I don't think Taylor will suck. I don't think he'll be down to like 11 or 12 PPR points per game. And maybe we need him to be closer to like 16. Like last year he was at 17.5. That's awesome. If he does that again this year, no problem. But I don't think his role is going to shrink. I don't care about the running back they drafted. I don't think their offense is going to change that much. I think he's still going to be the focal point. I think Jacobs is going to be the focal point in Green Bay again. And I think that we know what to expect with Derrick Henry. And that's a dude who is averaging over 20 points per game anytime he had at least 14 touches in a game. So as long as Baltimore is in games where they're not trailing bad in the second half, Derrick Henry is going to be fine. Unless, of course, old guy gets hurt.
See, that's the thing. It's like it's hard for me to say that these guys aren't bust proof when didn't you correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, you put Taylor in the bust category from last year, right? Because of injury?
Yeah, because of injury, but not
Right.
because of
Right.
performance.
But for this conversation, we're not considering injury.
Right.
Because everybody.
We are or not?
No,
We're not.
no.
Okay.
Yeah, he was RB7 per game. Jonathan Taylor last year in full PPR, RB5 per game in non and half PPR,
And he missed how many games?
He missed 3 games. But he was. I don't know where he ranked. Unfortunately,
You're on mute.
No, I was just saying he did outscore Josh Jacobs last year per game, right?
Who? Taylor?
Yes.
Yeah, by 3 tenths.
No, did he? Oh, I had them back.
I have it 17.5 to 17.2.
Okay, let's call
He
it.
outscored James Cook per game. He outscored Kyron Williams per game. Like, I don't think Jonathan Taylor was a bust last year.
Not even
No,
close.
only because of injury. No, he was not a bust. He just
okay. I don't.
He almost scored as many PPR points per game as Achane.
No, fine. Yeah, I can take him off the list. He was 13th overall at running back in full PPR.
And if we knew that Derrick Henry was going to play 15 games, he'd be an early round 1 pick. The whole reason why he's not a first round pick is because he's the old man.
Oh, I think his ADP will put him in round 1.
I do too.
He's
What's
at 14.
the injury risk?
He's
This guy's
just
been healthy.
outside.
This guy's been healthy every year but one of his career.
Right. When he broke his foot in half.
Right, but it's hard
32.
to say that a 31-year-old running back is not bust proof.
Yeah, this guy's
As good as he's been.
Every conversation we had about Derrick Henry a year ago, it's like
Completely incorrect. You're right.
no, but not just completely incorrect, but the same theories still apply, right? Because he had 19 catches in 17 games.
Yeah, look, he continues to defy the odds, and hopefully he does until the day he decides to retire. I mean, he has been one of the biggest freaks of nature in a positive way in this game at this position, and he continues to reward fantasy managers despite idiots like me saying he's going to be a bust.
Well, look, he went from 3 seasons of 4.3, 4.4, 4.2 yards per carry to a career high 5.9 yards per carry.
Well, I mean, we also said that, and it was a very small sample size because the Titans didn't win very many games. But when they won games in 2023, he was still that same guy. And then, going to a team that averages 10 wins a season under Harbaugh, I mean, that was just an easy win for him given the circumstances. Like, he's always been better when the team is successful.
Yeah, sure. Because any running back who doesn't catch passes can get game scripted.
for sure.
But so that wasn't really a big issue for him. However, I just think it's just worth noting, pointing out the efficiency being obviously, like, you could say, oh, he's going to run better with the Ravens. 5.9 yards per carry is insane.
Yeah, that's beyond anything we would have guessed.
Yeah.
And now he's got his new goal in front of him, so it's easy.
Right, getting the Sandler movie.
That's right.
I don't know why I haven't drafted him yet. It's like I'm still worried about the possibility of him being a bust. Because first of all, we pretty much only do full PPR drafts. Be different in a different format. But with Derrick Henry, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I need to pull the trigger one of these days because he's freaking Derrick Henry,
Good analysis.
Yeah, well, I
I'm
don't
not being sarcastic.
know.
that we know who he is. We know what he's capable of. We know what his upside is. Sadly, he was not one of the guys that averaged 20 PPR points per game last year. He did when he, had 14 or more touches. On the year, just 19.8.
There you go. I think James Cook is bust proof in the third round. It's another one I think Heath is definitely going to agree with me on. Disagree with me on, excuse me. But just to sum it up, James Cook was RB 19 per game 2 years ago when he scored 4 touchdowns. So I can't really see him being any worse than that. And realistically, I don't think James Cook is going to be anything worse than RB 15. And I think that's going to be right around his ADP. So that's why that's been a guy that I've been happy to take in round 3.
I think the only thing I would be concerned about is that he was RB 19 2 years ago. And last year he had actually fewer rush attempts and catches per game than he did in his RB 19 season. So, like, if he has last year's usage and the touchdowns are half, then he's a bust.
Yeah, it's going to be an ugly bust.
Is there another running back in that range that you feel better about, safer? So that would be Breece Hall. I'm seeing Kyron Williams and Fantasy Pros ADP. Well, we would definitely rather have Kyron Williams. Let me just see who's going around James Cook. Breece Hall, James Cook, Omarion Hampton, Ken Walker.
Yeah, rather have Cook.
Walker's the only one that's close.
Who do you think's more bust proof, Walker or Cook?
No holdout.
I'll say Cook, provided that he doesn't have any type of holdout, practices throughout training camp. Like, don't let the contract stop him. If the contract issue becomes a problem, then he's very much.
This is like a tough call because you're comparing him to a guy that's always had injury problems.
And Walker, sure.
It's like if you say right now they're both playing the same amount of games, I'd rather have Walker.
I think if we're not considering injury at all, then I think Mixon, Connor, and Kamara have a better floor than Cook.
You feel that way still about Mixon after the Chubb?
I don't. This again, I could just be wrong about this, but I don't think Nick Chubb's going to matter.
I'm with you on that.
Okay.
I hate to say it, but I agree with you. I'm agreeing a lot with Heath today.
Last
weird.
one. Do you think Christian McCaffrey is bust proof other than injury? If he stays on the field, he's bust proof.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is anyone here worried that they take more work off his plate? Especially in the
I would
early
be surprised if they didn't, but I still think at a lesser workload is still top 3 at the position.
Okay. All right, guys. Let's take another break. Wide receivers when we come back on FFT.
Critics are buzzing about the new season of Yellow Jackets.
This is not healthy.
Yellow Jackets' new season now streaming on the Paramount Plus with Showtime plan.
So are there any first round wide receivers that you guys don't think are bust proof?
By your definition, probably not.
I'll rephrase it. Are there any first round wide receivers that you could see finishing outside the top 10 at the position, realistically?
So
Without
first
injury
round
to their quarterback.
This probably got to be a little bit lower because there's going to be like 7 guys taken in the first round.
is that Chase, Jefferson, Lamb, Neighbors, Puka, Nico, Amon-Ra? Is that the first round?
I don't know if Nico will get in the first round, but I would say the other 6, yes.
Well, I can tell. I'll just tell you right now what Fantasy Pros has: Chase, Jefferson, Lamb, Puka, Neighbors, St. Brown, and Nico's 12th.
Okay.
Yeah, we have Nico at 11.8. So
I think if we're taking all injuries out of the equation, then the one that I could see is there's still a decent chance that, not a big chance, but Devontae Adams could be the number 1 touchdown scorer for the Rams next year. Puka Nacua could be the 1B in terms of targets for Matthew Stafford. And then Puka maybe falls to, I don't know, wide receiver 11 or 12.
The problem is that Puka Nacua averaged 18.8 PPR points per game last year. Do you know how many touchdowns he scored?
What's 5, 6? Oh, well, he was on pace for 6, I think, right?
Right. He didn't play the full year, but I think the number might be even lower than that.
3 touchdowns in 11 games. He was on pace for 5 touchdowns.
And he averaged almost 19 PPR points. So I can't call, I know, Heath, I think you're just like playing devil's advocate more than anything else, but I can't go to Puka and say, well, he could still bust because Devonta Adams hogs so many touchdowns. I'm kind of counting on that. And I'm cool with it. It makes me not want Puka as much in non-PPR, but I still think he's going to be a very good fantasy receiver.
I mean, you could obviously make an argument for a lot of these guys. Chase is probably the most difficult one, barring a Burrow injury. But I mean, Jefferson's getting a first-time started quarterback, which could be disastrous. Sorry, Thomas. I mean, CeeDee Lamb's coming off a season where he just lost. Dak Prescott is 32 coming back from that injury, and now has George Pickens there. Neighbors may not click with Russell Wilson, who's, in his late 30s and may have to go to Jackson Dart, which could be a disaster. Puka, Heath just gave you that scenario. I mean, we talked about Amaro St. Brown yesterday, right? And the potential of the touchdowns regressing and the catch rate going down and all those things, so we saw AJ Brown, you mentioned it, he was a bust last year. Nico.
Go ahead. Make a bust case for Nico. Cause I actually think he's one of the guys that I would put toward the top of the bust proof list.
Well, I mean, for starters, his quarterback is coming into camp with a shoulder injury. So that could be.
Yeah. He was throwing last week though, but you're right.
Yeah, I mean,
that's a great point.
Again, all of these are very small nitpicking things because you see consensus wise, I'm no different. I have all these guys ranked as first round picks. So I'm excited about all of them. But I mean, look, what if the combination of Christian Kirk and Higgins are just great and it's taking away some targets and production from Nico? Like,
yeah, I thought about that.
They're small things. They're very small things. But
Stephon Diggs was having a very good year. Tank Dell was there, and Nico was still really good. I'm just going to tell you right now, I love Nico Collins.
Yeah, there's reasons
a lot of
Nico Collins. This isn't to talk you out of anybody of talking out of loving Nico Collins. I don't think Heath was trying to do that with Puka, and I wasn't trying to make the case with any of these other players because, again, this is where I have them ranked. But if we're making a bust case, like it's hard to say that Jamar Chase is bust proof when you laid out the 2023 season when Joe Burrow, who's had a pretty lengthy injury history, was struggling with injuries, and Chase suffered.
I do want to try to take out even quarterback injuries from this.
I get that.
But yeah, because when Chase and Burrow were healthy in 2023, which wasn't that many games, but yeah, it was amazing. And then he carried it into 2024, which gives me more hope that he can have another huge season of 22 or more fantasy points per game. Jefferson, I've talked about this a lot. The targets went way down last year. They didn't throw quite as much, and you had Addison and you had Hawkinson for half the season, and now you've got this wild card at quarterback. Neighbors, like I would personally, maybe it's this like self-loathing Giants fan thing here. I would not put Neighbors on a bust-proof list at all because I think Russell Wilson might be horrible. And
no, here's the thing, and this is kind of the point. First off, all the reports of Russell Wilson at Giants camp are like, holy crap, this is what a real quarterback looks like.
Yeah.
So even if he's like, we haven't seen anything to suggest he's worse than, I would say average, but slightly below average maybe as an NFL quarterback. And Malik Neighbors as a rookie just delivered a monster season with Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito, and somebody else. I can't
Boyle.
3 guys on their quarterback depth chart that are probably better passers than anybody he's ever caught a pass from in the NFL.
Okay, so let's look at it this way. What if, and this is now I'm going to play devil's advocate. Russ is below average, like you said, and the Giants actually have a semblance of a run game and a semblance of a defense, and the target volume for Malik Neighbors, which really is what I think helped carry him to some of those huge numbers. He averaged 11.3 targets per game. What if that number goes down to 8.3? That's what Amon-Ra had last year. I think that's your bust case for Malik Neighbors is the passes are maybe a little bit better than they were last year, but there's just not as many of them because the Giants aren't in the same type of situation that they were in a year ago.
I would just say that like that's possible, but the Giants are favored in one game on their entire schedule.
No,
Right,
I completely agree with that.
That's what concerns me, though, because it's not Russell Wilson that concerns me. It's Jackson Dart. And I do feel like they could go to Jackson Dart fairly early. They have the toughest schedule in the NFL. So maybe you think Dart is just better than all the guys they had last year. And I do agree with that. He probably will. I don't know. He may not be better than what Daniel Jones was. He's a rookie and honestly not that great of a quarterback prospect. So that's what scares me with Malik Neighbors. And as good as he was last year, he was wide receiver 14 per game in non-PPR and wide receiver 8 per game in full PPR, which is great. But with all those targets, 11 whatever targets per game, as Dave said,
11.3.
now he's being drafted in the first round. It was great last year when he was a 4th round pick or whatever he ended up being, but now he's being drafted in the first round. The standards are higher. I am concerned about Jackson Dart.
I just don't know. Like maybe they do make the switch early, but I can't imagine they make the switch in the first half of the year unless they've also fired Brian Dable.
Yeah. Okay.
They have a very late bye, week 14.
All right. That would be our wide receiver discussion. Let's go to
Well,
tight end.
can I make one other point about the receivers?
Actually, yes. And I had a follow-up question. Go ahead.
Those 7 receivers that we talked about, there's a reason why they're taken first in drafts because the case for them as busts are pretty minimal. And I don't know how many other receivers at the position can touch that group of 7 in terms of upside and potential and all the things.
Well, you're leaving out 2 then.
Who are the 2 I'm leaving out?
Well, AJ Brown and Brian Thomas. I mean, they have just as much upside as those guys.
But you can make a better bust case for each of those guys than you can for any of the 7 that we've talked about.
But you know what? 2 guys that I think one guy that you put on your list that I didn't mention. Would you say that T. Higgins and Drake London are basically bust proof? Like it seems like the worst of T. Higgins when he's healthy is something like wide receiver 15, and Drake London should just be an absolute target hog. and there were 2nd round picks instead of having to, hope for 20 points per game. You'd be happy with like 16, 17 out of them. Do you think Higgins and London are bust proof?
I think Higgins is not bust proof whatsoever. Last year was his best year by far. And if he doesn't score as many touchdowns, he's taking a big step back. 9.1 targets per game seems like a lot. I don't know if he can replicate that.
He was wide receiver 5 last year, though, right? So
right, and we're not drafting him as wide receiver 5, but there's years
healthy
on record where he's like wide receiver 25.
If he's healthy, it's hard to see him being a bust.
It's also hard to call him bust proof when he seemingly misses 4 games every year.
Like,
but
he's the Ken Walker of wide receivers.
Yeah.
And I don't think I can call. I don't think Drake London is to the point where you can have the bust proof conversation. Like he did average 16 fantasy points a game last year, which is what you're saying that you want. But the 8-week 18, I think, had a lot to do with that.
He averaged 8.8 targets per game without counting week 18. If you include week 18, it's 9.3. And he averaged like 15 PPR points. It was exactly 15 if you take out week 18.
That's Drake London. Okay.
That's Drake London.
As we've talked,
that's what you should expect for Drake London when you draft him, somewhere between 15 and 16.
He could be better than that, though, with a more live arm at quarterback.
As we've talked about these running backs and wide receivers, and we've made these bust cases and these bust proof cases, do you feel the first round running backs or first round wide receivers are safer than, is one safer than the other in your mind?
The receivers are safer.
Collectively, the receivers are safer.
That's so interesting. I was kind of leaning the other way. I felt like the running backs, I felt like the running backs had better bust proof cases.
I mean, I think in the case of the running backs that are slam dunk first round picks, I feel the most confident in Bijan. That's why he's first for me. Barkley terrifies me because of the workload and the history of 2,000-yard rushers. Achane was not terrible, but he was pretty bad when Tua was not there.
He's not, for what it's worth, Achane is not a first-round pick in ADP.
Okay, so take him out of the conversation.
It's Gibbs, McCaffrey, and Genty right now.
Gibbs was obviously not as good when Montgomery was healthy. Genty is a rookie coming off an extremely immense workload in college in his final season. Who else? Henry?
McCaffrey.
I mean, obviously, and Henry at his age. So when you look at the receivers, I feel much more confident that they will stay healthy and
All
deliver
right.
close to what their production should be, barring injuries to their quarterbacks too.
That's fair.
Plus, you'll like the running backs that are available in rounds 3, 4 compared to the receivers.
Completely different show, though. I get that, but I'm just talking about who's more likely to be a bust in the first round.
Right. But I'm looking ahead when I make that first round pick.
All right, tight ends. How many tight ends can we argue are bust proof?
I'd say 2.
Without injury?
Without injury, there are no. I'm not sure. I just got this memo. There will be no injuries in 2025. It's going to be a very healthy year.
Someone tell Donald Parham.
Then it's 1.
And that is
Kittle.
Oh,
I'll say 2. But
and
Kittle's
those are Kittle and for you,
Trey McBride.
and Heath.
McBride and Bowers.
Jamie, you disagree with that? You don't think McBride and Bowers are bust proof? And of course, ADP matters here. Those are second round picks. Kittle, more like a 4th round pick.
I mean,
explain.
Well, if McBride's touchdowns stay the same and his other numbers come down, I mean, obviously he's going to be a bust. And Bowers now has significant competition for touches in his offense by comparison. So, I mean, Kittle's situation got better.
My only, I don't have concerns about George Kittle being bad. I think it's hard to be bust proof when you never get 100 targets. And if his efficiency is just good, then he's probably not going to deliver on ADP. He has to be, and he has been the last 2 years, 11.3, 11.8 yards per target and scoring touchdowns at a 8% clip. That'll do it no matter how many targets you get. But we've seen plenty of years in the past where it wasn't quite that good.
His target pace the last 3 seasons, 17 game pace for Kittle, 96 targets, 97 targets. But luckily last year did bounce back up to 111 target pace for Kittle when he was the number 1 tight end per game. And, I think, Jamie, I was definitely kind of avoiding Kittle last year because he had this trend 3 straight years where his points per game had gone down.
Yep.
He was 31 last year? And now he's 32. He'll be 32 in October.
Mm-hmm.
I was worried about him. Then he comes out and he averages something like 15.7 PPR fantasy points per game, most in a long time. Number 1 tight end per game, number 3 tight end in PPR overall. And this was with him leaving week 18 early, just barely playing in week 18. So, anywho, what has changed? It's just the absence of Debo and Ayuk for a portion of it.
I mean, that's obviously the biggest part of it, so he may have his most targets since I don't know what season, but certainly the last 3 seasons that you gave.
Yeah, 97, 96, 111 targets. The year before that was 114 targets. I don't know that he's getting back to the 130 targets.
No, that would be probably a disaster for somebody else getting hurt and Ayuk never coming back or not coming back till toward the end of the season. But I mean, again, like we have some level of excitement to whatever degree for Jennings and Pearsall and, maybe Ayuk, certainly from a ADP standpoint, people, at least last time I checked, think he's the best receiver still for the 49ers. Like you're talking about guys that either have not done anything consistently in their careers or coming off a very significant injury. And then here's this guy who's been so tried and true for this coach, for this quarterback. Like there's so much to love about the situation for Kittle.
Okay, let's talk about Bowers and McBride being bust proof. Heath, you say both of them are bust proof. You're the only one who said that. Discuss.
They could both lose a target per game and still be, in my opinion, surefire bets to be top 3 tight ends. And I don't have much reason to believe they would lose more than a target per game. In fact, I think there's probably more of a case that the touchdown rate improves than that the target rate drops more than a target per game for both.
And I would agree wholeheartedly with that. Even though I think it could go the other way from a touchdown perspective a production perspective for Bowers and not necessarily improving for McBride. But I can still see that happening both sides.
Man, I don't know that we can make a case for anyone else. So I can't see Laporta being bad. So the thing is, he's tight end 4 in our rankings, and Laporta's tight end 4 in ADP. But he's actually going 72nd in Fantasy Pros. Dave, do you have our ADP? Where's Sam Laporta going?
Let me look it up.
I could 100% see Sam Laporta being bad.
62nd.
That's a little earlier than 72nd.
Yeah, he's going ahead of Jameson Williams. He's going ahead of Mahomes. He's going ahead of DeAndre Swift, George Pickens.
It's new offensive coordinator, only had 83 targets last year. Head coach can't stop talking about the Jameson Williams breakout. Like there's quite a few paths to Laporta being bad.
Sure.
On pace for 88 targets, which is not great. Yeah, okay.
Barring injury, if you told me Flacco's the starter all season, I would say Njoku's bust proof.
100%.
Yeah, but I'm not going to tell you that Flacco's the starter this season.
And you know who might also be bust proof, but maybe it's too low to count, is Hawkinson. Like he's going to see 8 targets a game.
You think
That
so?
would shock me. 8 a game?
I think he's averaged 8.6 since he got to Minnesota.
What did he have last year? He averaged 8.7 PPR points per game last year.
Well,
He averaged 6
he
points
was coming off of an ACL in the middle of the season.
Fair. I
get
get
that he's played. Was this the first time he's played with Addison and Jefferson? Really, I think they were all kind of in and out of the lineup in 2023. So then you had 6.2 targets per game in 10 games last year for Hawkinson.
He averaged almost 8 targets per game in his first 5 games of 2023. That was when Cousins was there. He was healthy. Jefferson was there. And then his targets ballooned after that, 3 games without Jefferson. Targets were still pretty good after that. So that's to your point, Heath, that he did get to that part. And if there's a suspension for Jordan Addison, then yeah, Hawkinson could be a tight end that gets you off to a hot start. And then you flip him like a burger when Addison comes back. I don't think he can get any higher than like 6.5 targets per game.
Who was it that reported the Vikings looking to add more layup throws to their offense because everything was so far downfield last year?
I believe his name was Thomas Schaefer.
Thomas Schaefer. Never been wrong.
What outlet?
And I do think that if they do that, like that's good for Hawkinson. He's going to be the guy that functions within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. So,
Like
and he's being drafted round 8 or 9.
Yeah, I'm not complaining about the price tag. I'm just complaining about the upside.
I can't do this math. 87th. That's what, round 7 or 8?
Early 8.
Early 8. Right. Right. There's just a huge gap between the top 3 tight ends and then the rest in terms of average draft position. So depending on what site you look at. All right, guys. Bust proof.
All right, guys.
Ready to bring it home tonight? We want the cup. We want the cup.
Hey, if you don't think you got enough FFT yet, about 25 minutes, I've got Dan coming on FFT Dynasty. It's Let's Play 2.
You know what's a great feeling? Don't tell Heath I said this. Heath sends us a text on Friday. It's me and Jamie, and he says, "Hey, I really need someone to come on the show. Are you guys available?" And I wasn't available. I would have liked to have helped, but totally reminded me about the mock draft that I had completely forgotten about. That was going to start later that day. So,
You want to know something else? I was asleep. I fell asleep after taking my kids to camp. And I saw Heath's text. And I was like, "Oh crap! I have a draft. Oh, I can help out."
Heath, surprise texts like that when we have drafts are always welcome. I appreciate
Okay, I'll surprise you with all kinds of things.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for watching and listening. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Wait, let's guess. What's Dan's background going to be? The living room, the FFT background.
I was on a call with him yesterday. Oh, you were on that call.
The stadium.
He did the stadium. He had the stadium background yesterday. So I think he's riding that old Meadowlands Stadium, Giant Stadium for the World Cup. And what was it again? 94? 2? Whatever it was. Yeah.
Do you think he goes stadium?
I think stadium.
I'm going to go the FFT background.
Only one way to find out.
Yes. Tune into FFT
text from Heath.
Yeah. YouTube.com/fantasy football today to watch all of our shows. Hit the live tab if you miss any of the live episodes. They'll be archived there. All right. We'll talk to you tomorrow, and then we're off Thursday, and we'll talk to you again on Friday. But for now, we'll see you Wednesday on FFT.